Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just want to do a lesson on uh, Sodom and Gomorrah and relate it to America. Just biblically, review the account, some lessons learned, in my opinion, something very, very important that actually inspired this whole lesson for me is just the role of women, and it's going to be controversial for some, but, for those out there who have an ear to hear, I think that it will make sense, and its relevance to this time period will also make sense, and why I think it's important, to pay attention to. So I'm looking at the stock market. It's kind of low today, but also I was just thinking with just all the stuff going on in the world and all that and all the chaos that's making its way into the mainstream media now. I mean, to me, it's a good time to be in the business of truth. Like stock market can do whatever it wants, ultimately whatever God wants, but um, it's just a good time to be a truther. I think that people who are in various, different truths and conspiracies and all that kind of stuff, it can be isolating, at times, but um, it can't be like that forever. These truths that, these conspiracies that many of us now believe are true, or we're waiting on, some of them, they're, it doesn't look like they're that far off. We're not going to have to wait forever. And, the potential rewards for clinging on to these truths to me is, it's immeasurable. It's just an amazing thing. Flat Earth and all these other things like Mark of the Beast and Mystery Babylon and all that kind of stuff. And, they're heavy, they're scary to some extent too. But, if they actually are fulfilled and become true, it's an amazing thing, that we've known them beforehand, before they come to pass. And so, for those out there who feel isolated because of the things that we believe, just take comfort in the fact that, to me, there's no way that these things can be that far off. And I'll show some of it using some basic mathematics as well. And so, if people probably know about the account in Genesis 18 and 19, where, God is now hearing this outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah. So in in Genesis 18:20, it says, "Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." And so this also to me indicates that sins reach like a certain level, and then it triggers something with God. And we've seen that in Revelation as well, where it says that Babylon's sins have reached unto heaven, and that there is a limit. It's not going to just go on forever. And so, to me, the same also is for things going on the right hand side. For people to like get God's attention, it takes a certain amount of righteousness. Prayer, fasting, charity, and all that kind of stuff. There are thresholds. You don't just randomly walk up to God and then get his attention. And then the flip is also the case. There are certain boundaries that are set for the amount of evil, that God can tolerate. And so it works on both sides. And, it looks like he has a fairly high tolerance, for sin. In my opinion, he would kind of have to, dealing with this many people and, this many lusts and perversions. But, at this time in Revelation 18, it was getting bad, and so Abraham being, a righteous man and knowing that, a family member that he knew was there, Lot, he then goes and negotiates with God, really, from verses, when does it start? Verse 22. And then, he starts going back and forth with God saying, if you find 50 people, 20, and then he gets God down to 10. That in verse 32, he answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." So if God goes there and finds 10 righteous people, he won't destroy it, because Abraham, being a righteous man and knowing again, like he has a family member there, that's what he knew at that time, to try and lobby, for somebody in his family, he probably, I'm assuming, didn't know the extent of the evil that's there, or else he would have just requested it to be annihilated and then have just warned his family member Lot, to get him and his family out. But this interaction to me also shows that righteous people negotiate with God, and I think this is, to me, one of the beautiful things about flat Earth, and that I do now directly. I'm not saying I'm righteous, but I just negotiate with God. If God exists, I don't care about anybody else's opinion. And the last thing I really need to do in these days is just remove my own opinion, and then I would say that element of progress for me, my character and spiritual development has matured. Because I literally don't care about people's opinions. And, I used to say that a lot, I just don't care what people think and all that. But now it's literally true. And it's an amazing thing. That's a gift in and of itself. And then, so, like I said, I'm just kind of removing my own opinion from the discussion, the dialogue, and then just doing what I can to lean on God's more, and the more things that point to God being real, especially the God of the Bible, it's easier to do that. And then, like I said, all these truths that we're waiting to see manifest are making my opinion less and less important every single day. And that's a good thing. And so righteous people negotiate with God, and often it involves our own life. In this case, Abraham is pleading for the preservation of other people's lives. And so God welcomes that. It's just, to me, like the one thing that I want people to know is that the God of the Bible will allow people whatever they will settle for. He doesn't like, sometimes he'll give people more than what they deserve and less than what they deserve for his purposes. But generally speaking, God will give us what we settle for. If people settle for the mark of the beast and being tagged with an electronic device and being monitored by their government, who are now overtly satanic, God will give you that, if somebody is stupid enough to do that. And so God will let us have whatever we settle for. And so to me, there's always either an explicit negotiation happening like here with Abraham, or an implicit one happening between us and God, even for people that don't believe in God. And so just be aware of that. And so we see that here. And then so Abraham talked the Lord down to 10. And then, God visited this place, Sodom and Gomorrah. And so he went there, and then he doesn't find 10. And so he warns Lot, to get out of this place. And so Lot, his wife, and his two daughters were told to leave, because this place is going to get burned. Everything in here is going to get destroyed. And so in verse 17, and it came to pass when they brought them forth abroad that he said, escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And in verse 25, and he overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the city, and that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. I want to talk about that shortly, but I just want to get into some numbers. So I just did a quick Google search. People have estimated there were between 600 and 1,200 people living in Sodom and Gomorrah at that time. So I just, rounded that for this little analysis, or sorry, I took 1,200 just for my analysis. So let's say we only include Lot as a quote unquote righteous man, because he had a wife and two daughters. So if we take the ratio 1 out of 1,200 and apply that to America, to the number of adult males here in America, which is around 100 million, that's like 84,000 people in America, modern day. And so God essentially would, using the same ratio of quote unquote righteousness that existed back then, it would be about 80-some thousand people here in America that would fit sort of the characteristics of a person like Lot, like that God would pardon and warn beforehand and rescue or bring them to safety before they destroyed whatever God was about to destroy. And so we can see, like, if you include two, if you include his wife, even though she, like I said, she turned her back and then became a pillar of salt. She disobeyed God. God said, don't turn back, and she did, and then God did away with her. And so I wouldn't actually include her. And then two daughters. To me, I'm using this as motivation towards the 144,000, God's men, his elect. And so the numbers hold, in my opinion. We're talking about potentially like 100,000 people in all of America that God would, quote unquote, care about. And again, obviously don't quote me on these exact numbers. I'm just using it for how that number 144,000 makes sense. It's around that number that people in America, the number of people, men in America, that God would give some insight before he destroyed it. And so it's not that many people, and so with the amount of, people out there that would need to believe, first off, that America is Mystery Babylon because of the characteristics and the resemblance it has to Sodom and Gomorrah, that and more. And to me, the earth is flat, that Jesus is black. We're living in the end times. This is a beast system. The mark of the beast is here. Like, just these truths to me that align a person with the God of the Bible, valuing the law and how important it is to live it, and acknowledging that we can't, here, and being charitable, merciful, forgiving, and all those things that are also required. So there's a lot of sort of requirements, and to me, even that number is kind of high. There wouldn't be that many people that are quote unquote looking forward to something like this, and so I believe that this 144,000, some of them are not here, on earth. They're exempt from having to live in this quote unquote end times. And then this number are people scattered, around the world. But, if we, let's say like a quarter of them are here, it's like, we're talking about like 20,000 men, that could potentially be in America. And so something like that number makes more sense, to me. That's reasonable because, again, these truths, these things that, would be needed to know, or you would need to know these in order to have an expectation that God would do this. To me, it's just not for very many people, and I hate to call out this person on my chat box, but it's he's asking me about rapture and my opinion on it, and then he or she goes into some stuff, and then they're like, first, before we talk, do you believe in, the Antichrist declaring himself to be God, the mark of the beast, the 7 trumpets, 7 bulls, blah, blah, blah. And I just responded with, the Antichrist is here and has been for many years. And I cite 1 John 2:18. It is a group of spirits dwelling in people on God's left-hand side. They're collectively exalting themselves as God. Mark of the beast is also here. It just needs to be forced. We are living in a beast system and have been for many, many years now. Jesus' skin color is also made manifest, and so we know who the real Jews are. We also know who the real Jews are not. Those in Israel are the synagogue of Satan. America's Mystery Babylon, slated to be burned with fire. The earth is flat and motionless. These truths, to me, just dwindle down the group quickly, and then it's not just these things. These are just the doorways into an opportunity now to start living a certain way, and then doing the things that are required of salvation. We are required to forgive people, which is not easy. We're also required to forgive our enemies, required to love our enemies. We're required to judge other people rightly, and just be merciful, be charitable, and all that kind of. So the list goes on. It gets harder and harder. It's already a small group that would believe something like these points that I just mentioned. And then on top of that, to me, just because I believe those things doesn't guarantee me anything. It just means I have a chance, then I now have to live a certain way, and ultimately God can only judge if that's enough. But all I'm saying is the funnel is getting narrower and narrower at that point. And so there's not that many people, and I say this, not in any way to exalt myself, but for people who are truthers and have landed on these truths, like, it's a good time to be in the truth, because it's not for very many people, and then the potential payoffs are close by, because if America is destroyed, we're at the end, and then the kingdom of heaven is not far away, literally, and then spiritually as well. And so there's a quote unquote payoff, for those who God chooses to exempt from that destruction, and then one would think would invite into the kingdom of heaven. And so, just by the numbers, the numbers check out, that it's consistent, with the numbers in the Bible, just 144,000, whatever. It's on that order of men that are quote unquote righteous enough for God, and it's His judgment on what's enough. And then the Bible says that the 144,000 are virgins, which may be literal, and so that narrows the group down even more to who those individuals can be. And to me, that again proves that we're in the end times. If that's the case, and it may very well be literal, then who's going to be? And I'm not saying this is funny, but it's just the world that we live in. It is kind of funny. Like, no one can be a virgin like 10 years from now, growing up in the world that we live in. They just wouldn't function, like what would they talk about with people in grade school, high school, college, if they were reserved in that way? By God, they would have to live in some remote part of the world where they're not interacting with anybody else. And so, or the philosophies that have now permeated the earth. So to me, again, if that's literal and is possible, to me, it's even less and less likely that the end times is in a different generation, because people like that would not function. They wouldn't want to be here because there's just literally nothing to do, pardon the pun. And so, that's, it may be spiritual, and but either way, there's just it's a very, very small group. And the numbers, like, the only reason I kind of brought this out, check out, it's consistent with what God did in historical Sodom and Gomorrah, where He spared it for, let's just use one for now, just using Lot as the quote unquote righteous one that he was spared, or he was spared prior to the destruction. And we're talking about 0.1% of the population. And so it's not that many people. And so, again, I just want to say this as a form of encouragement for those. Be comforted if you happen to believe these things, and most importantly, live them out. And so the final point I want to make is about females and women truthers, prophetesses, and all this kind of stuff. It's not, a lot of this is not for them. It's not like the Bible is just pro male and 144,000 are all men, 24 elders are all males. Jesus was a man, and God is described as the Father. It's not like that's a spiritual thing, so we're not talking about gender in that realm. But the reason we sort of see a difference in men and women is women are largely designed to be earthly. They're here to have families, and like look for stability and continuity and longevity and all that kind of stuff. To me, you will just never see a woman teach any of those things that I just listed off, like America's Mystery Babylon, because of its correlation, resemblance to historical Sodom and Gomorrah. The earth is flat, Mark of the Beast. You won't see women go there. You'll see, the Patricia Steers out there here and there, and then, the Bible literalists occasionally, people like that peppered in there, but they won't go to these quote unquote higher level truths, and declare the extent of the evil that's in the world. And so if there's somebody out there, let me know, because I'm fairly up on, preachers and stuff, but I haven't seen one yet, and I don't think I will. The same thing I don't think I'll ever see a person who is quote unquote homosexual, but pushing these same truths. Like, I'm sure there are people out there who are struggling with that, and then God will, pardon them, because of their sincerity, and they're just wrestling with it. They don't like it, and all that kind of stuff. And they recognize God hates it. But I haven't seen somebody like that pushing these truths, like, flat earth, Mystery Babylon, Mark of the Beast, and all that kind of stuff. And so, again, I'm not saying God doesn't care about women or people who are homosexual. That's not the case. But as far as this small group, they're different, they're unique, in my opinion. And so to me, that's why women are not supposed to teach, and certainly not, the world is not supposed to be run by homosexuals, because they will not declare things that are evil as evil, and that's what it is. And so that's not their job, and it's the job of people like Lot, and other people who are prophesying, and they're men. And, that's just the way it is. Heterosexual males. I know that sounds bad, but that's just the case. That's what God wants. And it's proven by what we see. That's my point. It's like I said, you will never hear a woman or a homosexual speak against, the government with this amount of fervor that is needed to implement the mark of the beast and, coordinate and execute a deception like the flat earth, or the ball earth deception and the flat earth truth. And so, that is something to look out for. And we see that even right in the beginning of the Bible, where the serpent used Eve to deceive Adam. And so to me, just be very careful, because there are a lot of women out there like Lot's wife. They will look back. They will see the world that they have, or their existence here in America, even if they're a slave. They'll look back. They'll give this place a quote unquote second look, and that's not what we're supposed to do. It's the same thing. God's telling us, don't look at this place. Don't come out of her, my people. The Bible says that in Revelation. That's talking, in my opinion, physically, spiritually, to come out, and then also take our mind out of this place. Don't take it seriously, because God hates every aspect of it. Why would God go through all this trouble of creating all this beef, all this tension worldwide? That's just a stage to have Iran and all these countries hate us and then burn America. He wouldn't do that just for fun. It's to tell us, get us to align with him on things that he hates, and then he'll end it. There's nothing more after that. The stuff that he hates, he doesn't need to have it keep going on, if it's not serving a purpose anymore. So once this small group of people, like I said, relatively small group of people on the order of hundreds of thousands, align with God on his hatred towards Sodom and Gomorrah and any place that resembles it throughout any time in human history, it's, we're close to the end, and don't look back. And there will be people in our lives, family, potentially even a spouse, kids, all that kind of stuff. They'll look back, and let them. That's not for us. And it's better to obey God and care about God in these days than and ever for any time in human history than listen to sinful people. And most dangerous is a woman, because, like I said, in many ways they're the conduit for evil to sustain itself in the world right now. You will not find many female quote unquote truthers that will go to the level of truth to call out the evil that's very, very pervasive in the world right now. Bible literalists will teach the Bible, but she will not speak out against homosexuality and how America is the hub for it. And so, and all the female pastors that I've seen, whether mainstream or not, they're just self-help people, and stuff like that. They'll never talk about anything for real. We don't even have very many men talking about these kind of evils, much less women, much less people of a homosexual lifestyle. And so it's a relatively small group, and I would say, again, for people who resonate and vibrate with these things that I'm sharing on this channel, it's a good time to be in the truth, because it looks like these things are happening right before our eyes. Hope everyone's doing well. Bye.